The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. My name is Alan Blumkin. I'm here with my co-host, David Finoli, and we're going to be discussing the Pittsburgh Pirates for the next 45 minutes to an hour. Welcome, David.
Oh, thanks, Al. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Not too bad.
Yeah, I saw your book is coming out. When is that going to be on Amazon?
It eventually will. It's not going to be at first. We made a deal with Giant Eagle, who's a big local.
I saw the post on Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're going to have the exclusive rights for the first few months, and then after that, it'll get a posting on.
Was it the 21 most disappointing moments in Pittsburgh history?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you got 1972 and 1992 Pirates in there.
Oh, they certainly are. We pulled together a collection of 13 just wonderful historians and authors in the area. Dave Cicatello, who you know from Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Told the story of the death of Bob Muth and just did a wonderful job on it. But we're excited about that. 100% of the author royalties are going to go to the Josh Gibson Foundation, which does some wonderful work for the kids in Pittsburgh who need some help, and we're very proud of that. And if anybody is looking for it online from out of town, just instant message me on Facebook, and we'll arrange to get one out to you.
Okay, fine. And that's great. That's really very, very nice to hear.
Yeah, no, it's a great collection of stories, and certainly part of our history in Western Pennsylvania. I'm really excited about it.
Amazing, because I was in Pittsburgh for the Sabre Convention at the end of June. I wish I could have met more of the pirate chatters.
Sure.
But I guess it didn't work out. And when you go to one of these things, I mean, you get there and you turn around and it's time to leave.
No, it was a quick week, but it certainly sounded like it was a great convention. I was sorry myself I couldn't get away from work to catch some of it, but it sounded like it was a tremendous time.
Oh yeah, I was very, very glad I went. But just wish I could have gotten down to Oakland to see all the old sites.
Oh,
most of which are probably gone. Yeah.
So they've done tremendous work.
And I also read that the Post-Gazette is not printing Tuesdays and Saturdays anymore.
Yeah, it's a shame.
I know that they have that in Cleveland with the plane deal.
Yeah. I want to say it's all part of the same company, but it's a shame. I mean, nothing better than especially during high school football season, reading the Saturday morning edition. And a friend of mine, Chris Fletcher, reminded me that the other day, just, what we're going to be missing by not having a Saturday paper. But,
well, I got my first print copy of New York Times yesterday for the first time in I don't know how long. And the cover price is for a weekday issue is $3.
Wow.
They raised it from $2.50. I wasn't aware of that until I saw yesterday.
I wasn't either. And
I don't know what the Sunday is yet, but a friend of mine who subscribes to it told me that it's obviously not what it used to be.
Right. Absolutely.
So, anyway, let's get to the sore subject of the week. One of the posts I made the other day was, I said, the Pirates scored another run. Wow.
Yeah.
That's 7 runs in 7 games. I mean, and 3-1 nothing shutouts. And the pitchers must be flipping out. All of a sudden, they're pitching extremely well, and they can't score.
Right. It's a crime, and I think one of the great stats somebody put out at one point, I think it was before the last game against the Braves, that they had scored 6 runs in the homestand to that point and had 6 errors. So when you have as many errors as you do runs, you got huge problems.
Oh yeah. No, the team has not been fundamentally sound for a while.
Right. No,
and I always find out about. I watch MLB's quick pitch every morning, and I see basically. I don't see as many, obviously, because I don't have them on TV here often. But the base running, especially between Marte and Polanco, is pretty bad.
Well, it is pretty bad. They're not rookies, they're not young players anymore. I want to say Marte is 29 at this point. So these mistakes have just gone over the edge. The episode this past week where Hurdle finally sat him down after just a half-hearted effort to get to first base, which has been going on for the better part of his career off and on. And the excuse that I didn't want to get hurt and miss the rest of the season was just as frustrating to hear as anything else. And then, of course, he takes himself to the doctor the next day, so he's out a couple more games. I'm not in the dugout, but it just reeks of what David Freese complained about at the beginning of the year with the bad attitudes.
Hurdle has basically, not very much control. Sounds like he's lost most of these guys because they're not buying into him anymore. No, it's tough. I with him in the first year of a 4-year extension, I can't imagine they're going to let him go. But it sounds like what this team needs is, it happens in the game. After a while, sometimes the players tune you out, and the Cardinals a few weeks ago got rid of Matheny.
Yeah.
And they've been doing very well since then.
Yeah. It was going to say every so often.
And the Reds, they're not a very good team, but since they got rid of Brian Price, they've been competitive most of the time.
Yeah. I think this team needs a Buck Showalter in here, guy who might not last more than a year or two, but might hopefully get him in the direction, because I still maintain this is a playoff contending roster of talent.
But the ownership, it doesn't seem like one that's going to pay for somebody not to manage.
Right, and they're not.
Yeah.
And I'd be stunned if they did. So it is what it is. He's a good guy. He knows his baseball. It's just sometimes you get the feeling like we're trying to go way overboard, making people happy with playing time and such, and this isn't the level that you do that at. And you sometimes you need to sit your star player, although you can make the argument that we don't have the depth in the system, especially in the outfield, where you're pushing a Jordan Lupolo up the ladder who probably doesn't deserve to be there. So I know it's difficult, but every so often, it's nice to show who's boss.
Yeah, it's when they got recently when they went to 4 games over 500, I figured the 500 season is in pretty good shape. Now, I don't know, they're going into Milwaukee, which has usually been a house of horrors for them.
Yeah. They've been more successful over the last few years there.
Yeah.
You have Milwaukee, who legitimately is fighting for a playoff spot, and basically, when they lost that game 6-1 against the Braves, you could put the cover over the season at that point in time and call it. And that's a part that has to be frustrating, because you work so hard to put yourself in the position to keep this team together. While I've heard lots of complaints in retrospect on the Chris Archer trade, that's what it took to get Chris Archer. That's why nobody could get him. And while he struggled a little bit up front, I think he's a great talent, and I think the team is going to be better off having him in the rotation.
Well, that's always been a rap on him. He's a great talent who doesn't know how.
Yeah. But, you want to hope that Sirich can get that out of him. I've heard a couple things from the fact he has 2 strong pitches, and he struggles with his 3rd and 4th pitches a little bit. So you get those in order. I've heard other things that he doesn't hide the ball enough, but his secondary stats with Tampa Bay, while his ERA and such, because I do think he probably gives up more than his share of home runs, is a little high. I think his secondary stats have always been good, and you get the one thing under control, and all of a sudden you have an ace of the staff. So Glasnow just, to me, appeared like he was never going to be anything more than what he was.
Yeah, the quadruple A player.
Yeah.
Yeah, one is too good for the minors, or not good enough. Not good enough for the majors.
Right. And he had incredible talent. It just, sometimes it doesn't, you need a change of scenery. He's pitched well in Tampa, but not as good as people have really been claiming.
Yeah. He led the league in losses. I saw him quite often because, the Yankees play Tampa Bay 18, 19 times a year. It seems like they're playing him every other week at times. So I saw him an awful lot, and, I always thought he was, overrated. But Glasnow, Meadows, I'm surprised they included him, but I guess in order to make that deal, they had to.
Well, they do, and that just makes me believe that, perhaps he wasn't in their minds going to turn out to be the player that they thought he was. You also have Travis Swaggerty, who seems to be getting a lot of good.
Do you think that they're going to re-sign Dickerson?
I think that was part of it. Yeah, I think that's part of their thought. I think they're definitely going to keep him next year in his last year of arbitration, and I think they're going to make the attempt to sign him. I also think they believe, while Jason Martin has struggled as of late in Indianapolis, I do think they think he's a legitimate major league prospect. And Brian Reynolds is, after a slow start, has had a real good year. The guy they got in the McCutchen deal.
Well, what about Brian Hayes?
Brian Hayes, in my eyes, he is the real deal. He is a major
Charlie Hayes is his father.
Player.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he has defensive skills that are major league ready. He's, I think, has done a good job at trying to at least become major league ready offensively at Indianapolis. He's hit well at 281, 30 doubles, 6 triples. He still has struggled a little with his power. I think he has 7 home runs at this point.
I can assume they're going to let Harrison and Mercer walk.
I would. I think Mercer he's a solid hitter. He's not a great hitter, but he's a solid hitter. He's not a good clutch hitter. And at this point in time of his career, he can't move to his right or left. He's very solid when the ball's hit to him, but that's one thing that has irritated me over the years, and I say constantly, if you're going to put your money into pitching, as the Pirates have done so much over the years, and then put a bad defensive team behind them, I don't think Harrison can make exciting plays. I don't think he's good defensively. I don't think he gets a good jump on the ball. Here's a guy that should be a utility player that we keep trying to push for more than he is. But I think they buy him out, and I think they let obviously they don't try to sign Mercer.
Yeah, the thing with that is that if you have a staff of pitchers that essentially pitch the contact and don't pile up big strikeout numbers, you have to have a good defense.
That's a huge point, Al. That's a great point. You can't look at these guys and teach them to do pitch to contact, and exactly put a group. I mean, Moran, Mercer, Harrison, Bell, the worst defensive infield in baseball, and that's Polanco certainly has been questionable in right. Dickerson has been a little better than I thought he would be in left, but he's still not good. And Marte basically is your only good fielder in there. I mean, that you can't go pitch to contact and then have that happen.
Yeah, one of the people on Pirate Chat referred to Josh Bell as Dr. Strangelove II.
He could be. He's improved quite a bit. I mean, I give the kid credit. I mean, he's worked hard and he's improved quite a bit, but he's just not going to be a good defensive first baseman. I mean, he does make some boots there that certainly most second or first baseman wouldn't. So that is a concern. That is a concern for sure.
Do you think Diaz is going to be out Cervelli next year?
I think he should. I think he should beat him up.
Yeah, because he seems to be able to hit.
Yeah, he has some pop in his bat, real pop. I know Cervelli has a personal high for home runs for him, but I don't see the pop in his bat that you do in Diaz. Plus, Diaz has twice the arm of Cervelli defensively. So you can tell me about framing pitches. You can tell me about how they call games, but I think the team is better with Diaz behind the plate. But you are going to have to find a legitimate backup at this point because, Stallings, in my eyes, is another quad A talent.
Yeah, Well, he's a son of the former basketball coach, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He is.
Who picked, as an aside, when the basketball season ended, and I predicted at the beginning of the conference play that they weren't going to win a game. I put that out on on Facebook, the Pitt Basketball Group, and people who want to retain him even after that season, give him a chance.
Well, I think he's a better coach than people gave him. I think he inherited a mess that was going to be difficult to fix. But on the other end, Capel came in, and I've never seen this before. In the space of a month after the recruiting season's done, he ended up pulling together the 35th best recruiting class in the country. I don't know how he did that. So,
if he has the Duke, he came from Duke, so he has that mentality there.
Well, he does, and I mean, I didn't mind Stallings. I felt bad for him, but Lord knows if this guy is.
He walked away with a nice buyout.
Oh, he did.
No, I find it very, very hard to feel sorry for these types.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But just the expectation with what he came into. But Capel was a right pick. It was the right thing to do in the long run, and the program now has some enthusiasm behind it, has some players behind it. The dead wood is pretty much gone, and whereas I don't know that they'll be anything more than a bottom half of the league team this year. I think the future is extremely bright for it, and for the first time since the 70s, I can say the city game with Duquesne and Pitt going forward is going to be a game that's going to be worth it, a game that's worthy of Cincinnati.
Well, hopefully it won't be as many empty seats as I saw last year. And speaking of empty seats, there's this one guy out that puts out the Pirate attendance figures, and he doesn't put a comment in there. Like last night, he put out, didn't last game, he put out 14,929. When he started doing this, I thought he was putting out zip codes. But obviously not. And their attendance, I mean, they're not as bad as the Marlins, because that's almost impossible. But they don't seem to be, and the one time they did draw a big crowd, I think it was Saturday, they put out a stinker.
Yeah, and that's a problem. On the positive end for this team, I mean, I do think even though they look like they're going to pull a stinker for the third year in a row, and that is frustrating with the talent they've had. I mean, you can put so much on the manager, but inevitably, these guys have to put the blame on themselves because, you got to take pride in what you're doing. You got to give your all. You can't be sitting out because you have a bump and bruise in a game.
There are a lot of players now. I won't say a lot. There are players now that say, "Well, I'm making $5 million a year or whatever, and they have to pay me whether I stink or whether I'm great."
And that appears to be sometimes what I see
with
this team. On the good end, what Huntington and I've complained about him a lot, but when he deserves the props, he deserves them. what he's done is put this team in a position next year to look a lot better than they have. Now you hope they don't screw up the off season and let it fall apart as they've done. But right now you have a starting rotation that is going to be among the better ones in the National League. Musgrove, I saw a stat the other day, which was he has the exact same stats as Garrett Cole from June to today.
And Trevor Williams seems to have come around.
Oh, he's been incredible. He's been their best pitcher. Tyon, he still needs to, take that next step that he has the talent for, but he's been a pretty good pitcher this year. I can't complain.
Yeah.
Nova, I don't think Nova will be here next year, but again, he's pitched okay down the stretch. But
Nova, when he was with the Yankees, had a tremendous year. He was 16-4, and then he got progressively worse for the rest of his time there. So I think that he'll be on the third year of a 3-year deal, and they'll probably try to get rid of him.
Yeah, I can certainly see them doing that. I wouldn't be stunned with that at all. But even if he's here, he's a good number 5 guy.
Yeah. But he's not an ace by any means.
No, and when they were trotting him out as an ace, they were having problems. Now they're trotting him out in a time where, or in a space where he's probably more conducive to as a number 4 or 5 guy. They certainly are in better shape. The bullpen all of a sudden looks like one of the stronger ones in the league. Vasquez at the back end, you have him a few more years. Kayla has pitched very well since he's been here. He's a great pickup from Texas. Crick has been tremendous all year. To me, you look down, you can say what you want, and I'm a little surprised saying this, but you know what? He's been more productive for this team than McCutchen has to his team.
Well, Felice has been awful.
Oh, Felice has been awful.
And Santana and
Santana's been outrageous. He's been very good the last year. So right now you're looking for 3 guys who aren't your best 3. And Rodriguez, give him credit. He's come in and he's done very well also. So that's 5 out of 7 guys in your bullpen. You need to find 2 that aren't so awful. But this team does have some. It's going to be a lot brighter next year going forward.
As an aside, one of the statements I made on one of the sites after the World Series with Yu Darvish, I said some team is going to grossly overpay him.
Yeah.
And he's leading. He and Cespedes, a friend of mine, came up with the Milkman Award. And he and Cespedes are the 2 leading candidates as the players who are making the most money and milking the DL.
Yeah, and that's just a shame. You're seeing that a lot of even worse things out there with the Mets, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. They don't hit that. They've got a bunch of overpaid players. Jay Bruce, who's been out most of the season. They got guys who they're playing guys who can't hit constantly. And they've got the DeGrom, of course. He got punished again yesterday. Yeah. 1 run in 6 innings, and that was too much.
Yeah, it's a shame, and it shows that spending money doesn't always equate to wins.
You got to spend it. You got to spend it smartly.
Exactly. You got the Dodgers who spend money outrageously, have all this depth. I know they've had injuries, but everybody's had them, and they're pretty healthy at this point, except for a couple guys. But you got them. You got the Washington Nationals, who have spent a lot of money, have a lot of talent, supposedly, and they're just both huge. They're going to both miss the playoffs. I don't understand how that happens.
Well, somebody put down that the Nationals don't have to worry about losing in the first round anymore.
No, they don't.
But I'm surprised that manager is still there because they traded Murphy to the Cubs because he was he was in a free agent situation at the end of this season. And even though a couple of people at the convention who were from that area told me that Washington was going to let Harper walk, and now it seems they're going to make a concerted effort to keep him.
Yeah. Well, I think Rizzo has certainly made some questionable moves out there, and they've got to question the direction that team goes. I mean, I was always a Dusty Baker fan. I know he had his struggles in the postseason, but he was a guy that at least always put you in a position to be in the postseason. So they, you make those moves, and sometimes they blow up in your face, and that blew up in their face. And
yeah, one thing that the Pirates would be contenders if they were the AL Central.
Yeah.
I mean, the Indians are not playing very well, but they've got a 13-game lead there. So the rest of these teams are pretty bad.
Yeah,
and the Pirates are in the Cardinals have become the position where they can challenge the Cubs for first in that division.
Yeah. Looks good. I think the Cubs are going to end up running away with the division by about 6-7 games.
Well, Hamilton's been brilliant for them. I think, he was helped by coming to the National League, back to the National League, and pitching in 100-degree heat in Texas with a team that's not going anywhere. I guess tends to wear on you. So they gave him a new life. And he's pitching extremely well there.
I think they've made some good moves. I think they're going to come out of the National League.
Yeah.
The team that looks like the one who could be the dominant team going forward, Atlanta has just a superior system. A friend of mine down there told me, he goes, you haven't even seen half of the pitchers they have yet. He goes, 13 pitchers within their system can compete for the 5 spots next year, and that's a deep system.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where, to me, again, I've said this many times, Huntington has failed with bad drafts, not aggressive Latin America dealings. He had a better draft this year and has gotten some better Latin American talent in this year. But
their drafts
survive in this market.
Their drafts consistently have been pretty bad.
Yeah, they have been. I mean, as I said, I like the one they just had, but I mean, you pretty much blown the last few years of draft, and that system is not strong enough to cover injuries. It's not strong enough to have a decent bench out there, actually.
But them and the Phillies are both doing. I mean, Nola has been fantastic for the Phillies, and Nola is 15-3 right now, and he beat Scherzer yesterday 2-0, and he's really the pitcher that's carrying that team.
Absolutely.
And
they have some nice young talent themselves too. Ariel was a nice signing in the off season. Santana, nice signing. They're just not ready yet. They don't.
I know. Yeah.
They don't have the depth of Atlanta at this point. So certainly after '92, I could never be an Atlanta fan, but I got to give credit for what they've done.
Yeah. Also, West is also very clogged. Every day there's somebody new up there. I saw the Rockies yesterday on TV beat San Diego when San Diego brought in Kirby Yates to close the game in the 9th inning, and he wound up serving a 2-run home run to Ian Desmond.
Yeah.
And the Rockies won the game 4-3.
Well, I mean that's a good team. That's a team. The one thing that kind of surprised me about both them and the Mariners, they both have very poor run differentials, both negative run differentials. So far over 500. So to me, that kind of is a signal that down the stretch they may not have enough to get them there. I still think somehow the Dodgers are going to find a way, even though they're 3.5 back now.
Yeah, they lead the majors in blown saves.
Yeah. But there's just so much talent there.
I know that. Yeah, well, they have Machado, and the shortstop Seager's been out all year.
Yeah. But they just got Murphy and
no, they ain't got Murphy. Murphy went to the Cubs.
Or Murphy, you're right. Murphy went
Yeah.
to I apologize. You are right. But they do have just enough talent there to pull them through.
I don't think much of Dave Roberts. I have a close friend who's a Dodger fan to the point where he stays up till 2 o'clock in the morning listening to them on radio.
Yeah.
And he is not a big fan of Dave Roberts.
Well, he can't be. And there's a guy that if they don't make the playoffs, he's going to get fired. I mean,
Yeah, well, they won the pennant in the National League last year.
Yeah.
But I'm just. You think the Pirates can attract people next season? Because their attendance has been abysmal this year.
I think they're going to have to make another splash or two in the off season. I think signing Dickerson at this point would to a small extension. I know they have him arbitration eligible next year, but I think that would be a positive move. I would be comfortable going with Newman and Kramer up the middle. I think they've both proven they're going to be adequate hitters. Both are upgrades defensively over what they're now, but I wouldn't also not see it maybe going out and spending a little money on a middle infielder next year to upgrade a little. But they're going to have to make that one or two. I mean, it's not going to be a $25 million a year splash move. I mean, they're never going to do that, but they may have to make a trade. They may have to do something to improve themselves offensively. But I think right now, as I said, they're in a much better position this year to sell the 2019 Pirates than they were to sell the 2018 Pirates.
Do you think they will make it to 500 this year, or is that going to be?
Boy, they're talented enough too, but you just gotta. You look at the attitudes the last 2 years when they were at this point.
Yeah.
In both seasons, they were at this point when they just collapsed.
Yeah.
And they're doing it again. And this is to me, this is the worst because the pitching isn't collapsing. Your hitters, I've never seen a streak like this where you just are not even close to scoring runs. And I think they're too good for that. I really think they're too good for that. But again, you've done it the last 2 years, and conventional wisdom is gonna say that when you're slumping like you are right now, there's nothing.
Well, it's really ironic because last Sunday they won an amazing game. They picked off Addison Russell, who is now being benched on the Cubs. They picked him off third base, which is something I haven't seen in a lot of years. And then Frazier at the home run when they won the game 2-1. The Braves come in after being swept at home by Colorado. Colorado swept the Braves 4 games in Atlanta. They come up here, they're beaten up and everything. You think that they would be, the Pirates would be able to pick up on that, and it was just amazing that they couldn't score.
Yeah, they should have picked up on it too because the Braves didn't play well. I mean, the Braves pitched well, but they didn't. Except for the one game, and that was late in the game off Feliz. They didn't really play well. I didn't think they did. I didn't think the Cubs played well. There's no reason they shouldn't have swept that series. But that's the small difference between being a playoff contender and being a team looking to next year. I mean, these guys have really pitched their butts off over the past couple of weeks, and Archer, I believe, is going to become one of the better ones.
Yet DeGrom has he's 8-8 with a 1.71 ERA, and every time he's scheduled to pitch, the papers here go crazy. Especially with the frustrations that he's felt all year, and he's also not feeling any love from them that they're going to. I think he's becoming eligible for the first time after this season, and they're not showing any real great love for him, which I think is upsetting him.
And that's rightfully so. And you look at a team like that, what are, and again, I'm looking at it from a 6-hour drive away, but what is their philosophy? What is their intention? What do they want to do? This is the thing that sometimes this team confuses you with. You don't know what they want to do. They're like trying to be something for everybody. Well, we don't want to go all in, but we're gonna get some things. We want to build in our minor league system, but we don't really have a lot of prospects. You don't know what this team believes in. Now the Pirates, certainly went all in at the trade deadline, and to criticize them for throwing away prospects after for years saying you gotta spend some prospects to get some better players in here. I do find comical, but at least I see the Pirates with some direction now. I think while they've lost, I think Neil Huntington's had a good year. I still think the Garrett Cole trade was a fine trade. Hayes will take over for Moran, not next year, but the year after. But Moran is certainly a serviceable player, certainly can be a good corner utility guy at first and third base.
I think Freeze is a free agent after this season.
Yeah. And, hopefully you look around and you can find somebody to plug in there. But I think this is going to be an important off season for Huntington, and I think he has the core that can compete for playoff spots. But this off season you need to make a couple moves, and one of them probably needs to be to get another regime in here to lead the team on the field.
So they're not, as I said before, they're not in an easy division. If they were in the American League Central, I mean.
Yeah, but there's a difference between looking at a franchise like St. Louis, who spends some more money, but you know what? They win because of their system, and they make moves based on winning this year.
Yeah, well, they got rid of Matheny because they were not satisfied with his performance, and they got this bench coach who nobody ever heard of, and they're winning almost an 800 whip since he just swept the Dodgers 3 games out there.
Yeah, and and again, there's a team that has a lot of flaws to it, but they're finding a way to be 15 games over 500, I believe, at last check, 15 or 17 at last check. But again, I do think the Brewers are a better team.
I think the Brewers pitching is suspect, to say the least.
They are, but I just think they're a better team than St. Louis.
Well, they're going to have to prove it.
I got the Cubs there. How do you pick against Boston in the American League? The Yankees look like they're falling apart a little bit.
The Yankees are beat up.
Chapman's injury.
Yeah, they beat up with Judge. Judge was hit by a pitch. That's how he.
Oh yeah.
That's how he was hurt.
But again, a power team.
And they hit him in the wrist, which is not an easy thing to come back from.
No.
Sanchez has not been very good when he played, and he's been out most of the time. Now, Didi Gregorius is out, and Chapman is out. So the lineup they put out a lot is not very, 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 very good. Once you get past with Gregorius and Judge out, once you get past Stanton, there's not too much. Especially they insist on going with Greg Bird at first base, who hits an occasional home run and bats .210. One of the best clutch hitters, by the way, is our old friend Neil Walker.
Oh wow, very
He's
good.
not hitting for average, but they're playing him in the outfield now.
He gets the hits when they need them. But
but they platoon him. He had one game where he hit righty and lefty home runs a week or two ago, and then they sat him the next game. Aaron Boone is not exactly over-popular here as a manager of the Yankees, but he's also a first year, and he also came out of the announcer's booth.
Well, he did.
With no experience, so I mean, it's a number of these managers, it's learning curves.
You're playing 629 balls, so he's got to be doing something right. I mean, that's for sure. Although I think the one team that can challenge Boston in a short series or a series is the Indians.
Oh, yeah.
I like what they did with Hand. If Miller, I know he hasn't pitched a lot since coming back from the injury, but if he gets to the point where he was, I think they have just a great starting rotation. I know Bauer's out a few weeks with the broken fibula, but he'll be back for the playoffs, and it's a formidable lineup. And in a series,
they're just coasting now.
The most dangerous team.
Yeah, they're just coasting now, and they're going to get whoever finishes, the second place division winning record, which is probably going to be out of the AL West.
Yeah,
probably Houston, but maybe the A's or the Mariners. But the Yankees already. You listen to these talk show calling talk shows for a few minutes, and they're already worried about who's going to pitch the wild card game.
Well, it's
Severino has not
where
been,
they'll end up.
Severino has not been very good since the All-Star game.
No. They look like they're struggling a little there.
Yeah. And, the one who's pitched very well for them is our old buddy Happ, who, when the Pirates let him get away a few years ago, I was very upset by that.
That was a tough getaway, but
yeah.
Oakland's going to be a tough team in a one.
He went to Toronto, and the Yankees got him in a trade, right before the deadline.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And he's been brilliant for them. Lance Lynn has not been brilliant.
No, they're going to have a tough time with it. I think Oakland's the team that's going to get in there, and that is a bullpen that quite frankly, the last half of the year been the best in baseball.
Well, the Yankees have to make a trip out to the West Coast where they play both the A's and the Mariners, I think six games, and that is not going to be fun. No,
that'll be a nice preview. I don't believe, and after their tremendous start, I didn't believe the Mariners were going to be in at the end, and they've really started to fall back into place a little bit.
Okay, I think we've covered the gamut.
There you go.
Okay, today. So I want to thank you.
All right.
And we'll pick it up in a couple of weeks. Hopefully you'll be doing better.
You got it.
Okay, thank you, and again, congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Comfortably Zone Radio Network. This is Alan Blumkin. I'm here with my co-host David Nemec, and we're going to start a series of broadcasts on all-star teams by decade. And now, since the 19th century is a little too complicated to do it by decade, we're going to do cover the whole gamut of the 19th century today, and I couldn't ask for a better broadcast partner because Mr. Nemec is the authority on the 19th century. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Al. I appreciate that, and I really enjoy talking with you about it.
Okay, it's going to be your show most of the way.
All right, the reason Al said what he did, the 19th century is complicated because the rules change so frequently, and they impacted on players in significant ways. So for a player to even have a good 5-year stretch, let alone a 10-year stretch, was remarkable because there were constant pitching rule changes, there were batting rule changes, so careers nosedive suddenly or blossom suddenly. And if we get this close, we can start with the 18. Let's start at first base. There are 3 very strong candidates.
Yeah, Brothers and Connor have to be 2 of them. And Anson?
Brothers, Connor, and Anson, exactly, are the 3. And Anson was in 1871 to 1897 was his career. I mean, he had a 27-year career, played a number of different positions. He actually broke in as a catcher, and he caught his last 2 games, a doubleheader, in 1897 as a catcher. He caught 2 full games. And Anson also played third base. He pitched on occasion. He was probably qualified to play anywhere, but he settled at first base. And he was a very good first baseman, a very good all-around ball player. He's actually somewhat underrated today with all these achievements. Roger Connor was a good first baseman. He came up as a right-handed hitter and a left-handed thrower and second baseman. And he soon converted to batting left, and then he became a switch hitter. It really wasn't known until very recently that he switch hit most of his career. And as a result, he holds several switch hitting records that previously were credited to other players. Dan Bruthers was a different kettle of fish altogether. Bruthers was not a good fielder. He was really kind of a lot of teams infielders didn't want to play with him because low throws were going to be errors, balls that other first basemen either scooped up or stretched for. Bruthers let go by, and the errors would always go to the shortstops, the second baseman, or the third baseman, because Bruthers didn't get his glove on them, and the gloves in those days were very rudimentary. Bruthers just wasn't as much of an athlete as the others, but he was a very, very strong hitter. And of the three, he was far and away the most dynamic hitter. So you can take your choice of any of those three, Bruthers, Connor, or Anson, and you have a very good first baseman. And what's very strange about it is there isn't too much depth at first base throughout the 19th century. Once you drop below these three guys, you're talking about people like Tommy Tucker, who was a decent ball player for most of his career, but a star really in only one season, 1889, a switch hitter. And then there's a tremendous drop off. The only other really strong season by a first baseman was, I believe, in 1897 when Nap Lajoie, who really was a second baseman, played first base that season and had a terrific year there. Otherwise, in the 1890s, first base was the weakest position on the field. First base.
I would probably have to go with it, though, from what you're telling me, as an all-around player, because I'm not a Cap Anson fan because of his racial outlook.
Well, beliefs. There's some dispute on that. And Anson, when he retired, the reason really Anson wasn't willing to play with black players was financial, more than anything else. He did not see these games as draws. He did not think black players would add drawing power to the National League. Much as he was a National Leaguer through and through. He didn't tolerate the Players League at all. Didn't tolerate players' strikes or threatened strikes. The racial component is up for grabs. It's really debatable because once he retired, he formed semi-pro teams, and his semi-pro teams were ravenous about scheduling games with top black teams in the area. So it wasn't that he was opposed to playing with or against black players. He just didn't feel that the major leagues were the place for them, and mostly for financial reasons, not because of personal reasons. Second base. We moved to second base.
Yeah, I would go with Connor overall.
You go with Connor?
What you're telling me, he could practically do everything.
He could.
Yeah.
He was probably of the three best all around.
I didn't know that Brothers was that bad with the glove.
Yeah, he was. Connor was a good fielder.
A friend of mine who's into this, that. I don't know that he knows it either, yeah.
Yeah, he was bad, and he got worse as he got older. And that's really what drove him out of the National League.
He's in Dick Stewart territory.
To be good. Pardon me?
He was in Dick Stewart territory. Is that bad?
Yeah. For his time, he probably was.
Yep.
Yeah. There were some other first basemen who weren't very good, but he probably topped the list as far as longevity and never really improving as a fielder. second base, we can talk about fielding. That's where
So that's
second
where you
base
get
is a very,
McPhee,
very
right?
important position.
Yeah, that's where you get McPhee.
Bid McPhee is probably what probably gets my vote for the best all-around second baseman in the 19th century. And because McPhee began his career in the American Association with the Cincinnati team and played his first, I believe his first 8 seasons, 1882 to 1888, or not, first
89 was the last year. 90 was when they jumped to the National League.
In 90 they went to the National League. He's the only member of the Hall of Fame who played more than 2 years in the American Association. And he didn't get in until 1900. He should have been in 50 years ago. McPhee was a great fielder, a decent hitter, always, very rarely hurt, and he played barehanded until the mid-1890s. One of the last barehanded middle infielders. And what made McPhee so valuable at second base is because he didn't play with the glove, he was able to throw with either hand. He could scoop a ball running to his left with his left hand and then throw it to the first baseman. Or he wouldn't have to dig it out of his glove and then try and throw it to his right hand. He'd just scoop it up and then fire an underhand throw or with power to the first baseman. And going to the right, he did the same thing, often always barehanded. And held his own as a hitter, good base runner, good teammate. Wasn't on the strongest teams except for his first season in 1882. There were other second basemen that surpassed him in terms of individual seasons. Fred Dunlap was a very, very good first baseman, but his career was cut short with a broken leg. And after that, he really wasn't much of a player.
Oh, he was the one that tore up the UA.
He tore up the UA in 1884,
led
the league in almost everything. And it wasn't surprising because he was a very good first baseman in the National League, second baseman before he came over. And in you were going to talk about Burdock?
Yeah.
Yeah, Burdock was very underrated, not remembered today at all. But in 1880, the early 1880s, when most of the infielders were still playing barehanded.
Yeah, I did a presentation on him because a bunch of years ago because a guy came to a local meeting who was the great grandson of Burdock.
Really?
And Burdock had a ton of children. In fact, we got this guy, somebody in Cooperstown got me a family tree of Burdock. And this guy found out he had so many cousins he never heard of.
Huh.
Because of, Burdock had a whole bunch of kids. So I put together a presentation on Burdock. It was not easy to do that. But I did it, and I decided I presented him in the context of his time. Now, I noticed that he had 330, and if they had MVPs back then with the Boston, whatever they were calling them, so calling the Red Sox back then.
Yeah, they were still the Red Sox.
Yeah, they won the pennant.
Early 18.
Yeah, they won the pennant, and he had 330, so he possibly could have won an MVP if they had such a thing. And then the next year, he fell off tremendously, probably because of the overhand pitching.
Overhand pitching came into the league. Burdock started suffering some injuries.
Yeah.
In 1885, he played really only partial season due to injuries and batted all of 142. But that was just the beginning of Burdock's hitting problems. As the pitching rules changed, and he no longer could call for a high-low pitch, he was really in trouble. I think he liked high pitches. He's now facing pitchers where the strike zone had been expanded. In 1888, he batted 142 again, but this time he did it in 92 games, which was the better part of a full schedule, and that's pretty much spelled the end of his career.
Yeah. Who else do you have for second base?
Well, in the 1870s, the dominant second baseman, and some would consider him the best second baseman in all of baseball in the 19th century, was Ross Barnes. Barnes was a terrific ball player, great base runner, great fielder, and a fine hitter. Won several batting championships in the National Association. And
wasn't he done in by the fair foul change after 1877?
Foul rule. But that wasn't the only thing that got him. He would have survived that because Barnes was still fairly young, and he had the talent certainly to not just, the fair foul rule entailed a batter hitting the ball with spin, and the ball would hit in fair territory and then bounce into foul territory, allowing him to make, and in some cases, a home run without the ball ever going much beyond the infield. It would, hug the line for a few seconds and then roll out in the fair territory. As a result, third baseman, he was a right-handed hitter, would sometimes play in foul territory against him. They were allowed to do that then. The fielders did not have to be all stationed inside the fair territory except for the catcher in the 19th century. Once the fair foul rule was abolished, they no longer could use it. Then fielders did begin to, they had to come back into play at all times.
Yeah, well, that was 1878, I think they barred that.
Yeah. Barnes was, had a mysterious illness that he suffered in 1877. It handicapped him, and nobody really is sure what it was. It may have been a form of rheumatism. In any case, he was never the same player again, although he tried to hang on. And I believe he played as late as the early 1880s. But for his first 6 seasons, 1871 to 1876, there was not only no one comparable to him at second base. I think he was the best all-around ball player and by far the most valuable player.
Shortstop.
There were other good second basemen too. Cupid Childs with Cleveland in the 1890s was very good for a few years. Started to put on weight, and that handicapped him. We go back to the Chicago in the 1880s and early 90s. Had Fred Pfeffer. Pfeffer was probably rated second only to McPhee, and some would give him the nod over McPhee because he had a stronger arm and he also hit for more power. Pfeffer was a very good all-around ball player, very underrated. He didn't hit much for average, and that's been held against him as far as any possibility of him ever getting into the Hall of Fame. But he was a very, very fine player. And if we move on then to shortstop, we really have a muddle because
you've got George Wright, right?
You have George Wright in the
But you've got Glasscock. Jack Glasscock.
Yeah.
And you've got Ed McKean from Cleveland, right?
And Ed McKean from Cleveland was very good. John Montgomery Ward played short for a while.
Yeah. That's after he pitched, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a good shortstop, not a great one. Probably would have been a marginal Hall of Famer if not for his contributions forming the Players League.
Yeah.
And other contributions that he made in organizing players and being a guiding
he's the first one basically to stand up for players' rights.
Exactly. Yeah. So these guys were all strong shortstops. I would vote for Glasscock as the best all-around shortstop in the 19th century.
Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? People don't know about him.
A couple of reasons. Well, they don't know about him, and what they do know about him, they don't like. Glasscock never played on a pennant winner. Was usually on miserable teams. That was very much against him. Secondly, he jumped the Cleveland team in mid-season in 1884 and Cleveland was a pretty decent team, to join Dunlop in the Union Association. That was held against him. Then in 1889, 1890, that winter, he said, he was really wanting to go to the Players League. He made every indication that he would. But when the Indianapolis team, which he was with, dissolved, he then was free to sign with New York in the National League and stay in the National League, and he chose to do that. And as a result, he was disliked venomously by a lot of players in his time, and I think sports writers as well, and that's been held against him. But his career numbers are great, and believe it or not, except for the 1887 season, when there were 4 strikes, and that extra strike led to more hitting, and I think 4 or 5 players garnered 200 hits in that season. Nobody except Jack Glasscock broke the 200 hit mark until the pitching distance was moved in 1893. So he held the record then, barring the 1887 season, for the most hits in a season. It's a little known fact about him, but it's an important one. And he also won a batting championship, which was very, very rare for shortstops in that era. So I would give him the nod at shortstop. And then third base is really just as much of a muddle. I mean, Jimmy Collins came up late in the 90s, the latter part of the, 95 to 1900 era. He was there. He was generally considered to be, by many, to have been the best third baseman in the 19th century. I don't agree at all. I think he played on good teams. He had a good head, was a good team leader. Those were all important qualities, but they weren't necessarily making him the best third baseman. I think probably the best third baseman was Denny Lyons, who had a very checkered career. But he could hit, he could field.
He was one of those guys that hit 470 or whatever it was in 1887 because of the
when Walsh counted his hits, he hit over 400.
Yeah, that's where I heard
set a record that season.
It's from that,
because Walsh counted his hits, he held a record. He and not Willie Keeler held the record for the most consecutive games with a hit prior to Joe DiMaggio, because hits were counted as walks. And there were a number of games where he got only a walk, didn't get a base hit as considered today. They were called shadow hits in 1887. And he had strong seasons in 1887, but he wasn't really well liked, and he wasn't a great teammate. And as a result, the Players League didn't really go after him after the 1889 season, and he joined the St. Louis team. And a very strong, I think it was, I believe it was St. Louis, but it may have been Philadelphia. And I think he actually ended up playing for both teams that year. But he had a very strong season, but he was injured part of it. And then he had a couple good seasons in the 1890s, but then he began to get hurt a lot. So as a result, you don't hear his name at all today. And it's unfortunate because he's very good. Another great third baseman, who gets no credit at all anymore, was Jerry Denny, who played barehanded into the 1890s. A very, very strong fielder with a powerful arm. And he hit with power. He didn't hit often. He never had low batting average, power hitter, great fielder, great on bunts, and a strong guy, a guy that could play almost every game. Third base was a very, very tough position to play in the 19th century, especially if you were playing barehanded, because to stand in there against guys who really could hit with power, like Ed Delahanty and Anson could hit with good power.
What about
you
third
were getting drilled. Pardon me?
What about the third baseman whose name escapes me, who was with the Boston Bean Eaters in the 1890? I think that was traded for Billy Hamilton.
Oh, Billy Nash. Billy Nash was traded for Billy Hamilton. Yeah. Billy Nash was, if you don't vote for Denny Lyons, you probably have to vote for Billy Nash. Billy Nash had a long career, and a good one. And he, even though Frank Salee was the manager of the Boston team in the 1890s, until Nash was traded to Philadelphia for Billy Hamilton, I believe after the 1895 season, Nash really was the team leader for the Boston team. The Boston throughout the 90s, and not Baltimore, was really the number one team. They won more pennants, they won more games. They were in there every season, whereas Baltimore had patchy times in the early 90s, and they, after they won 3 straight pennants, that was it. But Boston won, pennants early in the 90s, in the mid 90s, and in the late 90s. They were the strongest team, and Nash was a big contributor to that. There were some other good third basemen. Ned Williamson, who held the record prior to the Babe.
Yeah, well, that was
home runs in a season.
The ballpark was didn't have 198 foot.
Right. Yeah. You hit the right field or left field and pulled it, and the right field just poked it. You could get an out of the park home run. The fences were very short. Once that park, I think it was called Lake Park, was taken out of commission, Williams' totals declined. And his all-around play declined, too, because he put on weight. He didn't have the kind of career he should have, and he died very young. Health problems really caught up with him in the early 1890s. There are other good third basemen that you never hear of today. Some, for various reasons. And there were a lot of teams that could never find a good third baseman. And so Cleveland was one of them in the 1890s. They went with a guy called Chippy McGarr because there was nobody better they could find. And during their best season, McGarr was their third baseman. Finally, in the late 1890s, they found a third baseman who later became a Hall of Fame shortstop in Bobby Wallace. Bobby Wallace, few remember that he actually began with the 1890s Cleveland team as a pitcher, then converted to third base, and then finally made his mark at shortstop.
What about McGraw?
McGraw is an interesting case.
Yeah.
When he played full seasons, he put up tremendous numbers. Not power, but in base running and walks.
Yeah.
He was probably the elite walk artist in the 1890s. But he rarely could put a full season together.
Yeah, I know that. I know he was injured a lot. Yeah.
He was injured, and he had illnesses, and his wife died.
Yeah.
He had a tough time getting in a full season. If not for that, I think he could have made the Hall of Fame as a player. But as a result, his career was cut very short. And once he started managing, he played seldom, and then he started. By the time he was 30, he was pretty much through as a player. But and bringing up McGraw, we have to bring up Huey Jennings too as a shortstop. I don't think Jennings was as great a ball player as some other people do. I think the whole Baltimore team, what made them look so good, what made Jennings look so good, McGraw to a point, and certainly Joe Kelly, was the overall strength of the team. They had a solid player at every position. Even Brewers played with Baltimore for a while. So they had, and Wilbert Robertson was a good catcher. They had Steve Brody, Kelly, and Willie Keeler in the outfield. They had a very formidable lineup, and they kind of they.
So do you consider shortstops like Bill Darwin, who I know there's periodic times, George Davis, who carry over from the 19th century to the 20th century?
Yes, absolutely. And Honus Wagner, who didn't play short really at all in the 19th century, came up, I believe, in '96, and became a great shortstop in the 20th century. But really,
the irony is that Wagner played his last game in 1917, and he still considered by most people as the best shortstop of ever.
Yeah.
And the same thing with John Lloyd in the Negro Leagues.
Yeah. Yeah, they were well, Lloyd was considered the Wagner of the Negro Leagues, and the black player is considered Wagner the white player. It never. I would love to have seen them both play particularly in the same game, but I don't know that they ever met in the playing field. But teams did in the early 1900s, and certainly by the 1920s, black and white teams did meet and postseason play, barnstorming, and there were a lot of interesting games, and a lot of black players made their marks because they were so strong against the white teams. But getting back to the 19th century, I'm glad you mentioned Dolan and Davis because they flipped my mind. Davis began actually his first year he played center field for Cleveland in 1890. Then he became a third baseman, and he was a good third baseman. Then finally the Giants converted him to shortstop. And that's pretty much where he stayed until the end of his career when he finally moved to second base. And they had better shortstops, and Davis was winding down.
Yeah,
Davis was a very strange guy.
Him when that jumping case when he tried to jump to the White Sox, I think after the peace was settled, and there was a whole big dispute, and they
tried to,
back to the Giants.
Left the Sox, jumped to the Giants.
Yeah.
Ended up sitting out most of the season. Then he went back to the White Sox when peace was established.
Yeah.
In 1903, but that cost him pretty much a full season and maybe 175 hits, which would have added to his total. As a result, Davis didn't make the Hall of Fame until long after he should.
I know that was only several years ago.
Yeah, I think he got in 98.
Yeah, and Dolan, periodically, Spatz wrote a biography of him. Periodically, he had a tremendous year in 94, dropped off sharply in 95, tremendous year in 96, then dropped off toward the end of the 90s, and then got caught in the dead ball era, where his averages really plummeted. Another who got caught in the dead ball era, we'll get to in a second, is Joe Kelly, and Willie Keeler probably more than anybody else. But in the 90s, Dolan seldom is mentioned among the great shortstops. I don't think he was really a great fielder, but he was a spark plug player. He was a fierce player, a heady player, and when he wanted to be, a very good player, but he didn't always want to be. Chicago had a lot of trouble with him and ended up trading him, I believe, for Gene de Montreville, when Gene de Montreville was a very average player. And Dolan bounced around from Brooklyn. He ended up playing with the Giants. I think he played even a year or two with Boston in the early 1900s. But he never got the credit he deserved for the length of his career and the quality of some of his best seasons. Okay, well, let's get to the outfield.
The outfield.
The outfield is, you break it down by position or just give a general overview of the outfield?
We could. Well, the outfield is very, very tough.
Yeah.
You got guys like Tip O'Neill who had very short careers comparatively, but you had some tremendous seasons.
I know your all-time favorite Browning is in there.
Really. Yeah, you think he should be in there, but you look at his overall stats. Browning never played on a pennant winner. He won batting titles in both the American Association and the Players League, and he had good seasons in the early 1890s in the National League. He was released by Louisville when he was in, I believe it was 92 or 93, when he was hitting in the mid 350s. They suddenly just dropped him from the team. And it's never been fully explained. And Louisville was where he made his home for his entire life. Browning was a very bizarre guy, and there is a biography done on him by Philip Bonboris.
Bonboris, I have that lying around somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good read, and Bonboris had trouble filling it out because it's a complete biography because so little is known about him after he left the major leagues, and so little is known about his early life. He just appeared on the scene. He was with the Louisville Eclipse, prominent semi-pro team before they joined the American Association in 1882. And in his first year as a major league player, his rookie year, he led the National League in hitting, or the American Association in hitting. And he followed up with another batting championship, and then probably should have had a third batting championship in 1886 by today's rules, and then won the Players League batting title. So this guy was a solid player, and I would have to put him in my outfield. I certainly want him on my team, especially if I had winning players at other positions. Joe Kelly is a guy who had some very, very strong seasons in the mid-'90s with the Orioles, but dropped off very sharply in the early 1900s once the dead ball era took over. He became little more than mediocre. And the same is true of Willie Keeler. Willie Keeler ended at the time he turned 30, he had a 370 career batting average. And that's higher even than Ty Cobb at the same age. And Keeler dropped off when he had a good season in 1901 with Brooklyn, but after that he tailed off sharply and really was no more than a slightly above average ball player in the dead ball era. And
you think
I don't know if I put
the implementation of the two-strike foul rule
it impacted on him severely.
Impacted him, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very true. I'm glad you mentioned that because he would have impacted heavily. A guy named Roy Thomas was also impacted heavily. Two strike. You were up until the 1901 season. You were allowed to hit balls foul at will. They weren't counted against you as long as they seemed to be a genuine attempt to hit.
Yeah, the American League didn't implement that till 1903.
1903. And
the National League went in 1901. The American League didn't adopt that until 1903.
Not only the American League, but colleges didn't. Other professional leagues, minor leagues didn't. The National League adopted a couple of very unpopular rules. They also wanted to abolish the hit batsman rule in 1901. And they started doing that in spring training. It was actually in the 1901 rule book. No more hit batsmen. But by the time the season started, they realized the absurdity.
That was crazy.
Because pitchers were hitting batters at will, and it was a feast for pitchers, to get revenge, and then they'd start throwing at each other, and it was crazy. And before the season started, they wisely, very quickly dispensed with that rule and restored the old rule. The hit batsman rule in the 19th century, if it's fully explored, is one of the most interesting rules in the history of baseball. And sometime we probably should devote a whole hour to talking about it because it was bizarre. But getting back to other great outfielders, there was a guy named Kurt Welch who was very instrumental in hit batsman rule changes. Welch was a tremendous fielder, covered a lot of ground, had a good arm. He's a good base runner. Not a very solid hitter, and his career was shortened by the fact that he was an alcoholic, severely truncated. But he was a really fine as far as fielding. Kurt Welch, Jim Fogarty was another great fielder, good field, no hit. There were a lot of very, very very polished and solid outfielders as far as defense went. Pop Corkill, these are not familiar names to most fans, was a very good fielder. People remember the guys who can hit, like Tip O'Neill hit, was it 492?
The 1894 Phillies with Delahanty, Hamilton, and Thompson all hitting 400.
And Thompson all hitting over 400. And then Tuck Turner, their roving substitute outfielder, also hit over 400. And they all were batting title qualifiers. So they had an amazing outfield that year in terms of hitting. Hamilton, many people would put Hamilton in their 19th century outfield. I'm not so sure. He got a lot of walks, stole a lot of bases, was a good singles hitter, didn't hit for much power, but he had a very weak arm. And they had him in center field most of his career. He wasn't really a great outfielder. But Delahanty has to be in the mix. He was too strong, just too strong a hitter overall, and that carried over into the 20th century. The dead ball era, he died in 1903, very tragically.
Yeah, well, that's
but he was still
Maxwell wrote a whole book on titled July 2nd, 1903, about Delahanty, either being pushed or jumping off the bridge.
Well, he didn't jump. He fell, I think. He was thrown off a train while he was drunk and forced to walk on the tracks. And
I heard stories that he wanted to leave Washington and go to the Giants.
He did.
And they wouldn't let him because of the peace agreement.
Right. He waited too long. And if he'd done it, he did try to do it prior to the season, and he couldn't make it. He was stuck in the American League with a terrible team. But Delahanty was great. There were.
What about Thompson?
Hugh Duffy was great for a while, but the was impacted by the rules on bunting, because you could also deliberately bunt foul, and it wouldn't be counted as a strike up to a certain point. And in 1895, they dispensed with where a lot of guys would hold the bat down near the hand, the end, and just tap pitches, just tap at them, and poke them foul. King Kelly was another guy who did it, and also has to be in the mixes among outfielders. But they changed that rule in 1895. If an umpire felt you were just tapping pitches foul, he'd call a strike on you, and that contributed to a very sharp decline for Kelly. He dropped, I believe, well over 100 points on his batting average from 1894, where he hit a record 440. But it's a very tough to do, because the era had a lot to say.
Yeah, I had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, what outfielders you want to pick? I put Browning in there. I want him on my team for a number of reasons. He was fast. He was a good base runner. He wasn't a bad fielder. He went after balls other outfielders didn't. And he also was deaf. So he had trouble on balls that could have been taken by either the right or left fielder. He often played center. He couldn't really hear a call being made by another outfielder. So, outfielders would pull up, then he'd dive for the ball and get charged with an error. And, it was a crazy time. It was crazy to watch him play, because you kind of feared for him at the same time that a lot of people worshipped him. And you didn't know whether he was going to get killed that day or he was going to go 4 for 4. But Kelly has to be in the mix too, as an all-around player, but a terrible, terrible fielder. Every position Kelly played, he played miserably. But he caught, he pitched, he played every single position on the diamond. And his fielding average was well below 900 at every single position. So he had limitations. But I'd go with Delahanty, Browning, and then maybe Thompson, maybe Hamilton. In the 1870s, Charlie Jones was another great ball player.
He was blacklisted.
2 years of it. He was blacklisted by Boston because he wanted to be paid.
Yeah.
They held back his pay.
Yeah.
And
he jumped to the. I think he missed 1881 and jumped to the AA in 1882.
No, 1882 was not allowed to take him. The National League hit the roof when Cincinnati signed him.
Yeah, that I know. Yeah.
If you play him, we're gonna find a way to get rid of you. You're the American Association. So Cincinnati couldn't really play. He sat out 81 and 82, which would have been two of his prime seasons. It might have even put him in the mix for the Hall of Fame. But Charlie Jones hit with real power, and he was a very strong fielder. He's little remembered today, but if you look back at his career and read what was written about him at the time, you know that this was a great ball player. And if you added 2 more years to his two top years to his career, he had been on the cusp. But then we come to battery, catching and pitching. And catching is a very, very tough choice because Kelly was a catcher for a lot.
Ewing, but when I look at Ewing's numbers, I mean, he missed a lot of games.
Missed a lot of games.
Yeah.
Was disliked by a lot of players, and I think is the most overrated 19th century player of all time. He played on good teams, pennant winners. He did catch, and he could catch. He was a good base runner. He was a heady player. He could hit, and he hit for power. He led the league in home runs one year. He had all the tools, but he didn't play. He did sit out a lot of games. If he didn't like where he was positioned in the batting order or the lineup, he would show it. He ended up in his career managing the Cincinnati Reds in the 90s, and the players all hated him. And then in 1900, he managed the New York Giants under Andrew Friedman, and the Giants all hated him.
Yeah,
fired.
And
George Davis was installed as manager.
Yeah.
And by the time he left the game, the reputation was in tatters. But people revived him at some point. I'm not sure when. And some consider him the greatest player in the 19th century. He may well have been if he had, really put in the time and, played full seasons. But he missed almost an entire season with arm trouble. He had only partial seasons many other times, and finally converted from catcher to the outfield. He caught far fewer games than Jack Clemens, far fewer. And Jack Clemens is never mentioned among the great.
Oh, he's a left-handed.
Entry.
That's the only reason I had ever heard of him originally, because he was one of the last left-handed regular catchers. Yeah.
He was the last left-handed regular catcher. Yeah, he was the only one. He was the first catcher in the 19th century to catch 1,000 games. So Deacon McGuire caught up with him, I think, by the end of the 90s. But Clemens was first to do it. And except for, there were a couple things against Clemens. One, he hated young pitchers, and he did everything he could to discourage them. Almost laughed at their pitching. They're fast, and he would often catch their fastballs barehanded with his left hand, and then laugh. And it would be one of the few times you'd ever see his face break into laughter or even a smile, because in team pictures, he looks like he's always angry, always disgusted, and he played that way. Why he did and whatever, there's very, very little written about Clemens historically. Nothing about him after he left the game in the early. He played, I think, until 1901, and if not for this, mystery about him, I might even say that he was the best catcher in the 19th century. But you have to go probably with Wilbert Robertson was very good. There's some great defensive catchers in the 1870s. who were all but catching barehanded. Deacon White began as a catcher. He was a very good one for that era. Catching is really, really a crapshoot because there is no one except Ewing would be everybody's choice, but not mine. So I would give it to Clemens. I'd want Clemens on my team and get a manager. He played most of his career under Harry Wright, and Harry Wright was not a guy who could work with a temperament like Clemens, but a manager who would have been like somebody like McGraw. I think McGraw would have made Clemens into a much, much better player and much better teammate. But then we come to pitcher, and then this is really where it gets tough because pitchers they were pitching at 45 feet from the plate in 1871. That was moved to 50 feet. In 1890, the Players League moved it to 51.5 feet. But the National League and American Association held firm at 50. Then it was moved to 66 inches. And the only pitcher, I think, who pitched at all the distances from 45 feet to 60 feet 6 inches, and was a regular pitcher. Wait a minute, no, yeah. Let's see. No, it wasn't Terry. Terry pitched. I don't know if Keefe might have. If Keefe lasted till 93, Keefe pitched at all the distances. He came up in 1880, so that was still 45 feet. Then it went to 50 feet in 81. And the way pitchers could, it was a rectangle. You started from a
you told me I could dance an Irish jig in there and then throw the ball.
You could do anything. Yeah. You could do anything you want. You could take a hop, skip, jump. There was a pitcher named Jumping Jack Jones who literally jumped when he released the ball.
Yeah.
And that changed in 1897. You had to have your front foot anchored.
Yeah.
When you release the ball. And that's in 1887 to me is when the modern game really started, even though the pitching distance was still short of what it is today. It was at that point pitchers' careers were ruined just that quickly in 1887. Guy Hecker, terrific pitcher prior to 1887.
Yeah.
Almost nothing afterward. Ed Morris.
Hecker became a position player after that, right?
Hecker became primarily a position player.
Yeah.
And not a very good one.
Not because somebody put him up in the Corsair Tales, the Pirate History Facebook group that I'm the administrator of, and I looked him up in the reference and said, wow. I think he was something like the only pitcher to have a 50-game winning season and win a batting title.
Yeah, the batting title is a little bit suspect because he really didn't have enough plate appearances by today's rules.
Yeah, by today's rules.
But by the rules of his time, he did. But there's some
rules today. You could throw out the Debs Garmses and the Bubbles Hargraves and all those types.
Yeah. But in '86, it's questionable whether he even won the batting title because when you sit down, I did do the '88 season to see if Cap Anson really won the batting title, and he didn't. He lost by 11 points. When I went through all the box scores, and the winner of the batting title should have been his teammate Jimmy Ryan.
Yeah, so
even though Ryan never made any comment publicly about it.
We forgot to mention Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan was a good ball player, not in the class of the really top outfielders, but a good, solid player.
Yeah, and the pitchers, I guess you have to put in Keefe. You have to put in Cy Young.
Cy Young.
Kid Nichols.
You definitely. Yeah, Kid Nichols.
Of course, Radbourne.
Yeah, Radbourne was good for 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean,
early in his career, then mediocre pretty much after that.
Yeah, well, after the 1884 season, they're using him every day.
Jim Galvin was a great pitcher, first 300-game winner.
Yeah, what about Mickey Welch?
Mickey Welch was good, also won 300 games. I would put Keefe, Young, Nichols. If you had to have a 5-man staff, in those days they had a 2.5-man staff usually, or 2, and something. I think Chicago in '89 was the first.
Was it Corcoran and who was the other one?
Corcoran was good.
Goldsmith.
Both of them ruined their arms pitching for Chicago. Anson would use them every day.
And Frank Killen was another one who blew up.
And Morris won 80 games in '85 and '86 combined. And
if you
80 games
really want to go back, you've got Tommy Bond. Tommy
Bond was a great pitcher for a few years, but these guys all ruined their arms.
Yeah, what about Carruthers?
Carruthers was you've got to find a place for Carruthers on any
I know,
team.
Because when they had that survey on the committee every year, I would vote for Carruthers until he finally got it, because most overlooked.
Yeah, he's he did. They now got a gravestone for him.
Yeah, and there's another one from the real early days named Buffington.
Charlie
Buffington, I think his name was.
Charlie Buffington was good, but not quite in the class of the others.
Yeah.
Dave Fouts was good.
Yeah.
But these guys, when they pitched for good, Silver King was good. But these guys, Fouts and King had fairly short pitching careers. But Carruthers, you got to find a place for. So I'd put him in the 5. Yeah, and Jack Stivitz was very good for a while. There were a lot of pitchers who had 3 or 4 good seasons, some as many as 5. But the longevity
because of the way they were used. Yeah.
Yeah, the way they were used. But Keith,
okay, David.
Nichols, those guys, Nichols and Young, started a lot of games. Amos Russi.
Yeah.
May have been the greatest of them all, but he got involved in contractual battles.
Well, with Friedman, and Kid Nichols went to the Minor League American Association, I think, for 2 years, and I think like 1903 and 1904, he would have wound up a 400-game winner.
Yeah, he would have.
Okay, let's,
left Boston, came back.
Let's pause, okay. I just want to say thank you. You're obviously a fountain of knowledge on the 19th century and almost everything I learned about that, because when I taught at the New School 25 years ago, I skated through the 19th century because I knew very little. And whatever I've learned about, in depth has been from you. I want to thank you for that.
Well, I thank you, Al.
And people, I hope the audience who listens to this learns something, because I found it very, very educational. I want to thank you, David Nemec, and do something else next time.
Yeah,
maybe
a lot years.
The
early part of the 20th century, which is really, really interesting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Once again. Bye-bye.